Sun in Sagittarius, the fabulous Sages out there. Now, those born with Sun and Sagittarius, really a part of the life purpose in this life and where they find their center is, and they find their power is by figuring out what is true for them and figuring out where it is that truth is ultimately very relative. Now, what's interesting about Sag energy is in its lower vibration, it becomes self-righteousness. It becomes the need to express and state and shout sometimes what is right and what is wrong. But when that happens, that's usually because on some level, that Sag knows that they're not moving in the direction that they're supposed to. And so the whole self-righteousness can come out at times as a distraction from where it is maybe they aren't so happy, where it is maybe they aren't living true to that voice within, that center within. But ultimately, when this energy does evolve itself, does raise itself, like sometimes we can see this in Sag kids. Sag kids really, they can go on one of these like sort of bends where they all of a sudden get really into recycling and think anybody who doesn't recycle is just so bad and so wrong. And they can become very like sort of active and aware about politics at a very young age and think that they have the answers to cure the whole world. And this is great to nourish, of course, in young minds, a sense of their own voice, a sense of their own value as well. But ultimately, there does come a point when, as part of the learning process, and what I have found with Sages as well, is there tends to be a point in life, usually a very distinct point. Now, if they're lucky, they go through it early. It depends on the different triggers that might happen in a given lifetime, but there does tend to be a point in life when they go through a bit of a crisis. And this crisis ultimately is a part of the very important process to help them to evolve. It is part of the way that the universe uses this to move them towards greater love and greater wisdom. And that wisdom is about truth being relative. It is ultimately a crisis that leads them to find humility, that ultimately leads them on the true search, which isn't about being right, but a search that has to do with finding a sense of spiritual purpose and value, finding a sense of value, yes, but in a higher sense. What principles, what beliefs are going to guide their life? This becomes a part of their journey. And as part of this, they've got to welcome in new experiences. Now, when I was young, my father used to tell me this story. Now, this tells you a lot about how I ended up how I am. My father used to love telling me this story about how there was a young person and he sort of grew up under his father's faith, and one day he said to his father, "Dad, how do we know that this is right? I don't know if this religion is really right." So his dad buys him a horse. He's 17 years old and says, "Okay, you go out into the world and you come back and you tell me." And so the kid takes off. He comes back when he's 40 years old and he says, "Dad, I went all over the world. I explored all the religions. I learned so much and I've decided you're right. This is the religion for me." And so my father probably didn't realize the consequences of telling me this, the full consequences. But essentially in that story, what he was doing was he was giving us, me and my brother, permission to explore, permission to consider the other ways of looking at the world, which is why I am so lucky my parents really allowed me to have that exploration very openly as well, to learn about different faiths and cultures and practices and religions. And so this is part of a process that Sagittarians must go through at some point in life when they allow themselves to, if they're going to evolve. That was the point of me telling you that story. It really is very metaphorical, this idea of challenging what you know and going out and gathering experience so that you can come back and say, this is who I am and this is what I believe. And it might be the beliefs that you were raised with. It might be something dramatically different. In fact, it is not uncommon for Sagittarians to at some point in their life sort of decide that this is what my faith and this is what my beliefs and this is my politics even, this is what it's going to mean for me. And it may be very different than what they were raised with. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just a really different interpretation with what they were raised with. But ultimately it's about being self-defined. As part of this as well, there is a desire to be out into the world. And so on some level, in order to fully find themselves and to come into themselves and find that sense of peace that comes from being really self-possessed, these are people who are going to have to travel. They're going to have to expose themselves to new ways of being in the world, even new languages as well. When I interact with a Sag, when I see a chart of a Sag who comes to me and says, gosh, I feel so lost. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I don't know who I am. If they say little key things like this to me, then I think, okay, you need to like take a philosophy class. You need to take a language class. You need to plan a vacation and go somewhere that you want to learn about, in a culture that you want to learn about. Don't just go to a resort somewhere where you could be anywhere in the world, but go be in another culture and immerse yourself in that, if only for a few days, if that's all you have. And that will give them the right perspective that they need to understand who they are on a deeper level, and likely welcomes experiences to them that can change them very dramatically and very quickly as well. Sun in Sagittarius is also a sign that needs stimulation. And so places of higher learning, places where ideas are exchanged, places that allow them that space to figure out what it is that their truth is, ultimately should be considered sacred ground, because it really is in these spaces, in the hallowed halls of the legal institution or the political institution or the university institution, that they come to find themselves and figure out who they are, and are able to then share the best of themselves with the world as well. Well, thank you so much for watching. Truly so grateful for this moment with you. Until we connect again, take care. Thank you for watching this lesson as part of Synchronicity University. You can go online at synchronicityuniversity.com, or click on your screen if you're on YouTube right now to access even more video lessons, to access horoscopes, interviews with some of the most amazing astrologers in the world, and so much more.